Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to make this short video. My name is Pastor Rashad, and I want to make this short video. I wanted to share a dream I had this morning before I forget it. And so I just want to get right to it. So this morning, when I got up, I woke up about 4 o'clock this morning. I laid in bed about 5:30 before I got up, and the dream that I had was very, very. I know it was prophetic. It had to have been. It was too many things going on that was pretty obvious that I think God was saying something. So let me get to it. So in the beginning of the dream, I knew intuitively that I was going to my family reunion. Now, interesting enough, in the dream, I was going to California. Now, typically for me and my family on my mother's side, we have our family reunions in Alabama. But I do have a lot of family in California. So maybe that's one reason why I was thinking California. But anyway, before we left, I remember I had looked up online like what hotel we are going to stay in. And it was like, the Expedia type of website in which you have, like your green stars for like 4-star reviews, 5-star reviews. So the hotel I picked up had 5-star reviews. So I said, oh man, it's gonna be nice, we're gonna be set. So it was almost like in an instant when I chose the hotel, I was at the hotel. But when I got there, it was not what was advertised. And so years ago, when I was a kid, we stayed at the Embassy Suites in Montgomery. And on the inside of the hotel, it's like a real open area. They have trees. I want to say they had waterfalls or some type of water thing in there. I can't remember, but that's what it looked like in my dream. It was like I was at the Embassy Suites in Montgomery, even though I was in California. So it had to have been the Lord just using that from my past to paint a picture. But anyway, I haven't been to the Embassy Suites in Alabama in probably 30, 35 years. So I was not thinking about that whatsoever. But that was in my dream. But when we walked in, I remember I saw all these people, and they were my family, but I didn't recognize them. So they were my family, but they weren't. But we walked in, I remember to the left and to the right, there was like water basins, right? And there was like water. But the weird thing about this was to the far left and to the far right, there were dead bodies in the water basins. There was one dead body to the left and one dead body to the right. And I remember people were shocked at seeing it. Now, the odd thing about this part of the dream was the dead bodies didn't remain exposed. It was almost like something, they were laying in a water basin, but then there were like covers that covered them up eventually. In other words, they weren't exposed for a long period of time. It was only for a short period of time, and they were covered back up. But in the dream, you could smell the stench of the dead body. So they'd been there for some time. And so when they were covered back up, what happened was in the dream was people went back to doing their everyday thing. Like they went to their room. It was almost as if nothing even happened. Even though they were laying there dead in these basins, just covered up, but you still could smell it. And so, me too. I was the same way. I just went about. I was okay. Let's go to our room, like there wasn't a dead body in the area. But anyway, so I went to our room, my wife and I, and the room was supremely outdated. It was dirty. I remember it was like a motel room, like like a real old motel room, Days Inn type thing from the 80s. That's what it looked like. The carpet was old, the bed sheets were all stained, the head frame for the bed had holes in it. It was a mess. And I said, well, we can't stay here. So I went down to the front desk. Now, very interesting. When I got to the front desk, you know how when you go to a hotel, a really nice one, like the people there are really hospitable. That's a big part of managing a hotel, you got to have really good hospitality. But when I got down to the front office, the front desk, these people were not hospitable. The one guy, he wasn't black, he wasn't white, he wasn't Middle Eastern. I don't know what he was, but he was my complexion, but he had like a foreign look to him. But when I got to the front desk, this guy had a gun in his waistband. He was not very friendly. They didn't even pulled it out. Now, he didn't aim it at me. He pulled it out like trying to intimidate me, whatever. And I was looking at him like, what in the world? What is this? So anyway, I walked up to him anyway, and I shared with him what was going on. And then he asked me, he said, what name is your room under? Now, in my dream, this is what I said. I said, Donald Trump. Now, I have no idea why in my dream I'm saying Donald Trump. Obviously, I'm not Donald Trump, but that's what I said in my dream. And so he went in the computer and he was looking up whatever, and he said something, and then he started laughing at me, right? Then he gave me something. I can't remember what that was. And another guy gave me like a black glove. And I said, why do I need this? What is this for? And he laughed at me too. And I walked away. And then I saw some other family members. Again, I don't know who these people were. They weren't my family, but in my dream, that's what it was. And I said, we're leaving. And they said, we're leaving too. And then I was on my way back to my room, and that's when I woke up. And I said, man, oh man, I got to pray about this. And that's what I've been doing this morning. And I do believe that this is a prophetic dream. And I'll just share what I think is going on, what my interpretation is, what I believe it is. And so the first thing is a family reunion. I don't think this was like my blood family reunion. Like I said, on my mother's side, we go to a family reunion pretty frequently as young kids in Alabama. And but this was in California, which I don't know why California. Again, maybe because my family's from out there, a lot of them. But I think this is more or less about our nation being a family, because the people in the dream, I didn't know who they were. I'd never seen these people in my life, but I knew they were my family. We were related in some way. So I think that's the picture of that. I think the hotel actual itself is like it's another picture. Perhaps it's a picture of the nation of being a house, or to a certain degree, it has something to do with President Trump, because I mentioned that in the dream. We know he owns many hotels. So I think that's the framing of it. But I also, the thing that's most obvious to me is, again, before we even went to the hotel, was the reviews. Like if you look it up online for this hotel, The Dream, it had stellar reviews. I mean, 5-star. Like when you go there, you're going to be pleased. The problem is when you go there, it's the complete opposite. Because when we got there, people were like, yo, this is crazy. And the dead bodies to the far left and to the far right, when you first walk in. And I think that's a picture or a symbol of our political parties. The left, the Democrats, the right, the Republicans are dead. They're dead. And what was so interesting in the dream was they were on display for being dead for a time, but then they were covered back up. In other words, it was more visible in the dream that you see how dead they are. But then in the dream, they were covered back up, but you could still smell the stench, even though they were covered back up. And the people were going about their business after they were covered back. But when they were open, people were looking like, whoa, what is going on? Why is these dead bodies here? But as soon as they were covered up, everyone was going back to their business. Like, okay, let's go to our room. And I think that's a picture of our political system. They're literally dead in the water. Now, when I went into my room, again, it was a mess. It was back in the 80s. It was like an outdated hotel, motel. It was That's what it looked like. It was like the carpet was so worn, the sheets were dirty, the headboard had holes in it, it was stained, it was a mess. And I think it's another picture of like, you don't want to sleep here. You know the old saying, like, you make your bed, now you got to sleep in it. And perhaps that's a picture of like where we're as a nation. We're dirty, we're outdated. Sure, we may have technology and everything that's up to speed, but spiritually and morally, we are a mess. You don't want to stay here. It is a mess. Um, you don't want to sleep in that bed. You don't want to get in that bed. But then, even when I went out the room and I went down to the front office, again, like, these are symbols. The guy that was in the, like, can you imagine, like I said, a person, a receptionist at the front office, front desk, standing there with a gun in their waistband and then pulling it out when they see you. What is that? And I do think that is a picture, perhaps, of the administration being like gangsters. But even more so, it's not just the administration. I think that's a picture of the American populace. We're not very welcoming. We're so on edge of one another. Like, we just don't like each other much because of the political divides. And I think it's a picture of that. There's like that's who we are. That's what we have become now as Americans. And me mentioning Donald Trump, that's the the name in which the room is under. And I think it largely is a picture of what's going on with him. All this stuff, I think, is a picture of what's happening right now in our country. Because, of course, right now with the Epstein files, there's so much stuff coming out with the corruption. Likely he's involved one way or another, whether he was involved in some type of pedophilia or he's protecting those who were. It's one or the other, maybe both. I don't know. But there's something going on with it. I don't understand what the one thing was when the guy gave me a black glove and they laughed and everything. I don't know what that was about. I gotta pray about that more. But I do think that this particular dream is showing us there is something awfully wrong in our country. And I think most of us already knew that. I certainly knew that. But on the same token, man, I was hoodwinked. I'll be the first to admit, like, I was on that bandwagon supporting the Republican Party because the Democratic Party was so bad, and which it is bad. Both parties are dead. The Republican Party is just as bad as the Democrat Party. And a lot of people can't see that. But hopefully at this point in time, especially with all the stuff with Epstein coming out, that you begin to recognize these people aren't who they say they are. Just like on the reviews in the dream, still the reviews. I remember, say when Trump was running for this campaign, one of the things he ran on was exposing Epstein. We're going to get these pedophiles, and Kash Patel is going to be FBI director. He wrote the book Government Gangsters, and he's going to go after these people. And he gets in office, and all of a sudden, that's a whole other person. I don't know what happened to him. And maybe they were playing us from the very beginning, perhaps. But the one thing you recognize is those reviews initially look good, but then once you're there, it's the complete opposite. You get dead bodies all over the place. And so I think for me, and this is the part from the dream, and I'm going to close out with this. I just want to share that dream. The place where I'm at now as a person, I look at this apart from the dream, and I say, the obvious thing is we're not going to vote ourselves out of this mess. The parties are too corrupt. The elite control both sides. Indeed, you can almost say Satan controls both sides. And I think we all need to wake up. If you're hardcore Republican or hardcore Democrat, you're just being manipulated to hate one another. That's all you're doing. I fell for it and I had to repent and say I was a fool. I was stupid. I used to go back and forth on social media about this type of stuff with the Democrats, especially during COVID and everything. And they were just playing us. Man, oh man. I feel like a fool. You look back at all this stuff now, and you say, man, we're just being played like a fiddle. And the people at the very top are just laughing at us. Um, so anyway, what's the solution to all this? You know, one of the things that we talk about on Sunday is this very thing. And in practical terms, the solution indeed it's Jesus. It is. And I know that sounds cliche, but it is the answer. It's not an American patriotism. I think American patriotism isn't even dead. In and of itself, let me be very clear about something. And I'm all for, I got if you can see behind me, Bill of Rights, the Constitution, Declaration. I'm all for that. The problem is there are people that think you can uphold that without a holy patriotism that is apart from America. In other words, what I'm trying to say is if you think that you can just wave your flag and be, I'm so American for our liberties and for our freedom, and you have no idea what virtue is and living a life of virtue, you're part of the problem. You're part of the mess. If you don't desire godliness in your life, you are part of the problem. And that's why I've kind of just backed away from a lot of that stuff, because you start to recognize that a lot of the people who are seeking the solutions, they do not desire holiness at all. They desire power. That's what they want. They want their side to be in charge. And I'm like, I'm done with that. That's like someone being really thirsty on a hot summer day, and instead of drinking water, they drink nothing but soda. Right? And because they're drinking all that soda, I mean, soda after soda, they get more dehydrated. In a minute, it may quench their thirst in the moment, but in the long term, they're doing more damage to their bodies. I remember when I was in Iraq, there was a guy that happened to a guy, because in Iraq it was 120 degrees outside. We out there PTing and everything, and this guy coming back drinking a whole bunch of sodas, and dude just passed out. Because you can't drink a bunch of sugar when your body it needs fluids. And so the reality of what I'm trying to say is this. I don't care how quote unquote patriotic you are or claim to be. If you do not desire holiness, let me be very clear, not just going to church, not just reading your Bible every now and again, not just, well, if you're a Catholic, I went to mass. That is so far from what I'm saying. I'm talking about a life of daily living of holiness and understanding what that is. The one thing that I've come to terms with is this: I'm done with voting at this point. Now, something changes in the future, hopefully with the nation, I'll vote again. But at this point, it's no point. But I've chosen to vote this way. By God's grace, He's made me a pastor. He's called me to be a pastor, so I can preach every Sunday. But beyond that, every day I have the opportunity to demonstrate a godly life, a holy life, to the best of my ability. And that holds me accountable to the Lord, to my wife, to my family, to my friends, to my church. Because that's the type of life I want to live. That's the way I can contribute to our free republic, is by showing, persuading, inspiring people with a holy, godly life that reflects Christ. Because outside of that, politically speaking, that's as in the dream, it's dead in the water. These parties are cooked. They're done at this point. Now, God can change. He may send a revival. He may send a reformation politically, perhaps. But at this moment in time, it ain't happening. Perhaps maybe the reformation is exactly what I just said. That's how it's going to come. So anyway, It's 20 minutes. I want to share that dream, a couple comments, and you can share this. You can leave a thought. But this is something that I saw this past morning or today, whatever you want to call it. All right, guys, have a blessed Friday. Tomorrow's Valentine's Day. Celebrate your wife, and I'll be talking to you guys soon. All right, have a good one.